Right, so Labour's hatred of the disabled is now so severe, and their determination to pinch pennies from those who are already skint rather than tax the rich so set in stone, that if it all gets too much for disabled people, Labour appears to now be offering them a way out. A way out of this mortal coil, that is. Whilst DWP boss Liz Kendall gets rinsed for accusing people reliant on social security for taking the mickey in some news headlines, going grossly underreported is the amendment that's being put forward by Labour MP Kim Leadbeater to her private member's bill, the Assisted Dying Bill. Because whilst this policy is already contentious and controversial, the idea of helping people to die who no longer have any kind of quality of life, the amendment proposed extends that to the disabled, particularly those with mental health problems at that. And with all the attacks on the disabled coming besides under Labour, from Rachel from Accounts to the vile Liz Kendall, any talk of assisted dying is of concern, especially when it comes to those with mental health issues. Right, so let's get to the bones of it here. Labour MP for Spen Valley Kim Leadbeater's Assisted Dying Bill has been of grave concern, excuse the pun, to disability rights organisations for some time, not least because of the vicious narrative towards the long-term sick and disabled. The disabled too often being lumped in with the long-term sick these days, as if many of their conditions, which may be lifelong or life-limiting, are somehow things they might be able to shrug off and work around. Walk it off, you're all right, and all of that. If you forget about disabled people as being separate from the presumably able to get better at some point long-term sick, it suits their policy making, which is anything but in favour of disabled people, as we should all damn well know by now. In what is better news for disabled people, though, Leadbeater's bill is taking a bit of a pasting behind closed doors, apparently, as the expert evidence she has put forward thus far, which has seen it pass first and second reading and now is sat at the scrutiny stage, the committee stage, to begin next week, as the evidence she has presented and the experts who have presented it, both through the progression of the bill and also having been taking place this week as well, have apparently been found to be rather one-sided. It's being reported that Leadbeater's ongoing social media posting of the progression of her bill has elicited several other Labour MPs who are against the bill to send around an email to other MPs, which has not been made public, annoyingly, which has criticised, apparently, the lack of experts in certain areas of concern, which are not gone into any deeper than that. Where expert voices are needed but are not present, though, and it is being reported that those who previously voted for the bill in light of this email may be considering changing their minds and voting against it at the crucial third reading now. And given it only squeaked through, relatively speaking, by 55 votes last time, it doesn't take very many MPs to change their minds to see this fall. Some 200 amendments have already been tabled to it, and Leadbeater herself has tabled one that is just insane. It's unhinged, yet seems to think this will be something enough MPs would support because she has tabled an amendment that, should it be accepted by the Speaker, and as the bill's sponsor, you'd imagine she's got a good chance of that, she's now opening up the possibility of her assisted dying bill being extended to the disabled and the mentally ill. Now, we're on seriously thin ice here, in my view. And having watched both my parents pass away from terminal illnesses, one from cancer, one from motor neuron disease, I can appreciate how much I would have loved to have spared both of them much of what they suffered from. My mother developed dementia alongside her motor neuron, so in what capacity could she have made the choice for her life to be ended should she have wished to? How could her mental capacity be established as sound enough for that? Should it be the next of kin who decide? As the eldest child, that would have been me. Would I have wanted that responsibility? Hell no. And I don't think the choice to end a life should lie with anyone but the person affected. So how can mental health patients, of all the mentally ill, make that choice? How can anyone having a bad day, be in a low mood, be protected from making a choice one day that they are making whilst not in a sound frame of mind? What safeguards are there going to be? Supposedly, it will only be available to those with less than 6 months to live. But again, where is the safeguard? And when it comes to mental health, is making an informed decision not still a moot point? Leadbeater's amendment means people with mental disorders or disability would be able to access the assisted dying service. And it should be noted that Leadbeater herself originally said the disabled were outside of the bill's scope. So what has changed other than Labour's attitude towards the disabled getting ever more abusive and ever more cruel? Putting a 6-month life expectancy clause in, how is this any better? Coming back to the matter of those safeguards, however, one thing Leadbeater wouldn't back was introducing safeguards to prevent doctors bringing up the option of assisted suicide with patients, because any notion of doing that, putting the thought in people's heads, particularly those with mental health disorders, that may already make them feel like a burden or make them feel unwanted, that can be viewed as coercion. Why would you choose to deliberately not protect such people from that? I find it particularly perverse that Leadbeater, an MP who only became an MP because her sister Jo Cox was murdered, who had her life taken from her, won't safeguard others potentially having their lives taken from them. And then you add the other narratives into this equation, and more, the attacks and legislation against disabled people can be seen as further coercion. The rancid Liz Kendall, in charge of the DWP, has been at it again this week, saying too many people on benefits are taking the mickey. You want to talk about taking the mickey, do you, Liz? You want to talk about benefits? Let's talk about yours then, shall we? Since becoming DWP boss in July, Kendall has charged her council tax, rent and utility bills to us to the tune of more than £6,000. As a minister wreaking havoc on the lives of those with meagre incomes, she's on over £91,000 a year as an MP, plus her ministerial salary on top, which adds on another £67,000. All whilst she actually lives in a £4 million property with her old Etonian banker boyfriend. Kendall has toddled off to ITV and spilled her weaselly black guts, saying too many people on benefits pretend they can't work, giving the impression once again that people can just rock up, sign on the sick, and that's it. They can sit on it all their lives, happy days. It's not true. 14 years of oppression by the Tories, which have seen so many people needlessly in this country die due to this conscious cruelty, the assessments, the medical evidence that must be provided to have any chance of making a successful claim, and the consequences of getting it wrong are academic and well documented. She particularly singles out what she referred to as the COVID generation, ignoring the very real issue, it seems, of long COVID. Do you actually believe long COVID exists or not, Liz Kendall? You ought to make that clear. And leaving people very much sick for the long term as that has. Some possibly never getting better, the virus having wrecked their health. People need to remember, 1% of people in this country pre-vaccine died when they caught it. So how can we believe there is no grey area, therefore, between those who died and those who shrugged it off as a little more than a bad cold? She singled out young people, particularly, talking about the mental health problems that they have. I'll tell you what causes them, Liz, shall I? Because you don't live it. And it is quite simply wages that don't allow people to live anymore. More than one job is needed to make ends meet. Nobody can afford to buy a house and end up renting. Therefore, their housing is constantly insecure. They end up trapped in a cycle of debt and poverty and misery where the social contract has been destroyed. So that's where your mental health problems are. But according to Kendall, it is matters like failure to turn up on time or not turning up on the right day that stress out and pressurise the young. So they're all basically just stupid and feckless then. Benefit fraud, particularly sickness benefit fraud, is basically non-existent. Just like the Tories before, Labour are confecting a crisis. They are blaming on those with the least, those with health problems, encouraging disability hate crime further when the issue simply doesn't exist. And that disability hate crime is on the rise, incidentally. And all Kendall can come up with is, if you don't work, we'll take what little money you do get away. And if Kim Leadbeater's bill passes into law, you might be offered the chance to die to get away from it instead. Many of the long-term sick are long-term sick waiting for medical treatment, and yet you have somebody like Wes Streeting in charge of the NHS saying there is no money to help you with your NHS treatment. Or you've got Rachel Reeves, Rachel from accounts, or Rachel from complaints, whatever you want to call her these days, useless mainly, just saying there's no money left for anything, let alone the sick and disabled, who she appears to have an irrational hatred of, going by recent attitudes in her recent interviews. And the list goes on and on. So many hoped things would be better under Labour for the long-term sick and disabled. It is so much worse instead. And we can only hope this assisted dying bill fails, because nothing this government introduces along such lines will ever be good news for us. Speaking of Rachel Reeves, still determined to not tax the rich as she is and raise much-needed revenue for the investment needed for growth, she is instead focusing on the disabled too, but only to strip millions from them in a bid to raise revenue from somewhere she thinks will be popular. Destroying the safety net we all hope is there for us, should we need it, should not be a vote winner. And if it's popular with you, you haven't learnt much from the last 14 years, have you? All the details of the rinsing Reeves has deservedly got for that is in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't already done so as to not miss out on new content dropping daily, and to help support the channel too, which is very much appreciated. And I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.